Okay, so very good afternoon to all. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being with us. Before the break, we had the privilege to listen to absolute legends of the field, and now we have one more legend for you for another brainstorming session. Now, as we head on the 11th technical session, I would like to call Dr. Bhatia to introduce our speaker, Dr. Kamla Pathak. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, participants and dignitaries. Uh, it is again a privilege to me to introduce one of the alumni and my senior from Punjab University, Professor Kamla Pathak. Thank you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable
Thank you.
time and providing us opportunity to interact with you. So, with brief, Professor Kamla Pathak is a alumnus of Punjab University. She earned her doctorate in 2001. Until then, she is serving the pharmacy profession. Uh, she is currently working as a professor at Pharmacy College, FI, under Uttar Pradesh University of Medical Sciences. She is member of various professional bodies and actively engaged in research on oral controlled, modulated, targeted, and topical drug delivery systems. She has around 300 plus publications in various national and international journals of repute. She has 3 patents, 3 books, 16 book chapters, and more than 200 presentations at different scientific platforms. She is a reviewer and on the editorial board of various scientific journals. Her H index is 330, you could say it's 40, around 40, and she has on editorial advisory board of American Association of Pharmaceutical Sciences. She has handled various research projects funded by government as well as industry. She has guided several PhD scholars and 100 plus postgraduate cases. She was awarded with Dr. Oral Nikor Award for her best research paper in pharmacy. She has received Motan Devi Dandiya Prize for her publication. Twice, she has received Eminent Teacher Award, Nirali's Inspiring Pharma Personality of the Year, Research Excellence Award, and many more. She is associated with Indian pharmaceutical industry in the capacity of scientific consultant. Uh, she is a reviewer, credited as a reviewer for scientific projects, Knowledge Foundation, Sweden, Israel Science Foundation, and she is invited member for American Nano Society. With this brief introduction, now I would like to invite Professor Kamla Pathak to have an interaction with our participants. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I'm opening my
Okay.
slide.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the well introduction. And there was a slight error that I am passed from Punjab University Chandigarh, and it was written as Sagar. So that is the omission I would like to present. So good afternoon, everyone who is present now, and I'm thankful to the university authorities and the FDP coordinator put me in for this session. And it's my privilege always to offer and share my knowledge with the co-professionals and the upcoming budding professionals. And thank you all for joining me. Right. So this webinar is basically on nano carriers, right? And possibly most of the speakers earlier would have spoken about the advantages, briefing about the positive attributes of nano carriers. But I will be talking on the flip side of the nano carriers, that is the toxicological aspects of nano carriers. Now, if you see the slide, the introductory slide, in this slide, I have presented a scale wherein it starts from tennis ball, goes down to cancer cells, bacteria, virus, antibody, glucose molecule, and water. So when we talk of toxicology or nano carriers, we are working in this range. That is 10 to 100 nanometers, and basically it is glucose molecule, between something between glucose molecule and the antibodies. Okay, so briefly, what is pharmaceutical nanotechnology? Basically, it encompasses nano formulations which have very small size, which is in the nanometric range, and basically these have a very enhanced surface area, which is basically the specific surface area. It is not the general surface area, it is the specific surface area which is of relevance to the pharmaceutical arena. And why we design this nano formulations? We design bioavailability and also try to improve the biological activity. So whenever a project is designed in pharmaceutics, keeping in mind the nano carriers, it is always the aim is to enhance bioavailability and biological activity. Apart from this, we can also have targeting through these systems, that is, which can provide passive targeting by size-based target. If the nano carrier size is less than or equal to around 100 nanometer, then we can have passive targeting. That is, because of the size, the nano carrier gets automatically distributed in the body. And the second activity is targeting by active mode. In this, we use certain ligands which are attached to the nano carrier. So we can envision a nano carrier as a magic bullet. Why it is a magic bullet? Because it is targeted to a particular cell. And this concept came from German hunter. There's a story where a German hunter was blessed with a gun which could fire a bullet, magic bullet, and that bullet would follow the target until it hits it. So in between, if there is any hurdle, it will not be stopped. It will find its way to reach the target. So that is the concept which has been extrapolated to the nanotechnology in pharmaceutics also, wherein we have a magic bullet. We consider nano carrier as a magic bullet which has a 4-component design. So this design is, we have a carrier or a substrate. That is the most important thing. We need something, a liposome, dendrimer, anything. A nano carrier is required, in which we entrap the active agent, right? And then a targeting ligand is attached so that it reaches the target site. For example, if you are targeting cancer cells or tumor cells, so that nano carrier, because of the ligand attached to it, it will manage its way through the body to reach the target. And at the same time, we also need a stealth technology. Why? Because we want to avoid the uptake by the RES system. So to evade RES system, we use stealth technology. So basically, if you see, these are the 4 major components of a nanocarrier system. And we can have many more also. We can have many more designs, but this is the 4-component design. And based on this design, investigators in pharmaceutics have experimented a lot, and they have created various nano carriers using various drugs. And because of this, we have hundreds and thousands of publications on nano carriers. But the paradox is that we have few commercial products. So the amount of research is very high and the commercial products are very less. But at the same time, why we have few commercial products? Because none of the formulations is actually meeting the magic bullet concept. So what is the trouble? For understanding the trouble, we should understand what is the difference between traditional approach and the nano formulation approach. See, nano formulation is kind of a nano engineering approach. And if we are using traditional approach, which means that we have traditional approach, whenever you make a tablet, what you do is you mix the ingredients, granulate it, and then compress it. So basically, it is very simple process where you are just taking the ingredients, weighing them in a mixing them, and then transforming into a tablet. Likewise, you have a simple formulation of capsule also. So it is basically blending and getting the formulation. Like it is something similar to we are baking a cake where we mix the ingredients in a right proportion and then bake it, right? So we get the cake. Now this appears very simple, but the trouble is in such a simple formulation, or if we slightly change it, either the process or the formulation, then we lose the product. And likewise, this happens for cake also. If we are baking a cake, there is a slight misadjustment of the ingredients or of the process, the cake is not formed. Same happens to tablet and capsules also. Whereas in engineering approach, it is something analogous to building a bicycle. See, in bicycle, we have various parts. So as such, it is looking very complicated. But what the beauty is that we can add each part wherever we like. We can change the design also very easily. So likewise, when we are designing nano carriers, we have 4 component design. So we have the active drug, we have the carrier, we have the targeting ligand, and we have a stealth technology. So the thing is, we can have various combinations. Anything can be varied. Like you can vary the drug, you can vary the carrier, you can vary the stealth evading MPS evading system, and then similarly, likewise, you can have various targeting ligands. So it means that we can easily manipulate the design of a nano carrier. And that can be done for bicycle also. Bicycle may, if anything is wrong, you can take away part and add a part, right? So bicycle, though it appears complex, it is easy to design. Likewise, nano carriers also, they are easy to design because you have various variations are possible. So that is why researchers are extensively using or working in this field to develop nanoparticles via engineering approach. But the industry actually, pharmaceutical industry thinks in terms of formulation. The pharmaceutical industry always wants a formulation that is easy to make and appears simple. So what is required is basically, if we talk of nanotechnology and traditional approach, it should be a mixture, which means we need a bicycle cake. That is as easy as this concept. So what is done in nano carriers? In order to have a particular property of the nano carrier, we want to have a certain physical or chemical or functional property. We add certain things to the nano carrier. And this is called as functionalization. And this I have exemplified by means of a liposome. See, this liposome has been divided into 4 parts. It starts with conventional liposome, in which we have a phospholipid bilayer, and that bilayer entraps a aqueous milieu where you have the drug dissolved. So this is a water soluble drug which is dissolved in the liposome. Now, if we want to improve this liposome, this has certain limitations. We cannot use it for all types of drug, or we cannot achieve the right kind of properties with it. So what we do is, in order to evade the MPS system, we add polyethylene glycol to it. So this is a pygylated liposome. So polyethylene glycol liposomes will not be taken up by the RES system. Third category is ligand targeted liposomes. So which means that in addition to PEG, that is we have added PEG so that we can evade the MPS system. We can add various ligands like protein, antibody, peptide, carbohydrate, small molecules. What are the purpose of these? Are basically targets. They are ligands which can reach the target, right? And the fourth type can be theranostic liposomes. The theranostic liposomes are those liposomes. Theranostic means a nanocarrier which can act both for diagnosis and for therapy. So this is a very super specialized kind of a nanocarrier system in which we can target, okay, as well as we can use it for treatment and diagnosis. Both of them can be done. So when we are doing functionalization, what is being done? You see a simple liposome, so initially very simple, it was very simple. We can add so many things onto it so that we can achieve the desired property. So what happens is when we do all these things, what is the aim? The aim is to increase the solubility, to enhance stability, to enhance specificity, to enhance efficacy, and many other multimodality approaches are used. Like I told you, theranostic approach can be used. So whenever we do such things, the aim is to achieve either of these or in combination, whatever the case may be. But none of the papers report about toxicity, which means that we have assumed that nanocarriers are not toxic. That is the basic assumption we have made. And is it true? We'll have to discuss about that. Now, I will say that it is not true that nanocarriers are not free from toxicity. Rather, toxicity is inversely proportional to the size. See, nanoparticles which we make, because of the nano size, they can easily cross various biological barriers. That is the basic advantage, right? And at the same time, NPs which are less than 10 nanometers, they act similar to a gas. That is, they can enter human tissues easily and disrupt the biochemical environment of the cell, which means that nanocarriers are not free from toxicity. And if the nanoparticles are inhaled or taken through oral route, they get distributed to liver, heart, spleen, and brain, in addition to the lungs in case inhalation and oral exposure to the gastrointestinal tract. So while we were aiming these things, what has happened is they get the nanocarriers have automatically biodistributed themselves into liver, heart, spleen, and brain. And if you talk about the lungs, the nanoparticles can stay into the lungs for about 1400 days, because half-life says it is for 700 days. So that is the time period for which they can accumulate. And if they tend to bioaccumulate, it is definitely a trouble. In addition to this, the nanocarriers tend to activate, immune response is activated by the body in order to clear the nanoparticles from the system. And while the body undertakes metabolism of nanoparticles, they even tend to accumulate in the liver. So all these things indicate that nanoparticles, because of their small size, as they can readily penetrate the cells and organs, it means they are more toxic to human health in comparison to large sized particles of the same chemical substance. So if we talk of nanotoxicity, there are three primary aspects. The nanotoxicity is surrounded around nanosize. Nanosize means it has easy entry into the cells. Because of this, there can be cellular damage to the mitochondria, to the nucleus, the DNA damage, anything can happen. Then they have a large specific surface area, which means they can be easily absorbed. The biomicromolecules which are already present in the body, the endogenous substances, they get absorbed onto the nanocarriers because of large specific surface area. And this will definitely affect the regulatory mechanisms of enzymes and proteins, because these are the biomicromolecules which will tend to get absorbed onto the nanocarriers. Likewise, most of the nanocarriers carry a surface charge. And because of this surface charge, there is enhanced cellular uptake. The more smaller the size, more readily it will be taken up by the cells. And because of this, it will interact with the cell organelles, which is present. As I told you earlier also, it can interact with the nucleic acid, it can interact with the mitochondria. And because of this, there will be damage to these cell organelles. So overall, the situation is very alerting. Nanotoxicity cannot be ignored. Just we cannot focus in research on the positive attributes. We have to think about the negative aspects also. So what are the concerns? See, the concerns is that there has been some report on the nanotoxicity during past 5 years, but still it is very less as compared to the total number of publications in nanomaterials. And most of the articles which have been published on nanotoxicity, they are primarily less of research based, and more of review based. So it is intended only for narrow specialized audience. Those who only know about it, they want to talk about it, they want to learn about it. Only those people are reading those articles. And even in those articles, whatever is being published, it is primarily on epidemiological reviews on exposure to particles. That is, geographical data is collected. Then, what is the effect on the health and targeted drug delivery, future directions of research, and regulation of nanomaterials. So, most of the nanoparticle toxicology reports are restricted to these topics. Whereas what we require is that it should be research based. We should have more of research reports on nanotoxicity rather than this. So, what is the scenario? Current scenario is we have the positive impacts of nanotechnology are widely publicized, whereas the potential threats and risk to human health or the environment are just beginning to emerge. So both of them are in opposite direction currently. So what we require is detailed studies on long-term effects of nanoparticles are required to overcome and reduce the possible threats due to nanocarriers. So what are the diseases which are associated with the nanoparticle exposure? See, we can start with the brain. So when the nanoparticles tend to accumulate in brain, it can result in neurological diseases like Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease. This happens when the nanoparticle is inhaled. So on inhalation, it can enter into the brain. And it can also, on inhalation, it can enter into the lungs. In lungs, it may result in asthma, bronchitis, and cancer. From the lungs, it can go into the circulatory system, wherein from circulatory system, it goes to various parts of body, and primarily it enters into heart, where it can cause arrhythmia, heart disease, and death. Otherwise, when it is entering circulatory system, it can cause atherosclerosis, vasoconstriction, thrombus, and high blood pressure. And when the nanocarriers enter into other organs, they can cause diseases of unknown etiology. Why? Because they are damaging, they are readily entering into the cells and they are damaging the cell organs. From the circulatory system, they can enter into the lymphatic system and leading to podoconiosis and Kaposi sarcoma, and even into the skin, causing autoimmune diseases and dermatitis. Now, on the left side, we can see I have depicted a picture wherein the nanoparticles get internalized into the cell and they are damaging the cell organelles, whereas it can damage nucleus, even it can damage the membrane, mitochondria, and the lipid vesicle which is present in the cell. So these are the various damages, cellular damages, which can happen. When nanoparticles are taken orally, they enter into the gastrointestinal system, causing Crohn's disease or colon cancer. And some of the nanomaterials are also used as orthopedic implants. And implant surgery is very common, knee replacement, all these things, they are being done very frequently because of the readily available nanotechnology. And these can cause autoimmune diseases, dermatitis, urticaria, and vasculitis. So these are the potential threats to the human body due to the nanocarriers which are find entry either through inhalation or through oral route. They can enter into various organs because of their small size. Now, when we design nanoparticles, the basic focus is selection of the nanomaterial, which nanocarrier we want to have, and the nanomaterials which are used can be divided into nanocarriers of metallic substances or nanoparticles of non-metallic substances. So nanoparticles of metallic substances are made up of aluminum oxide, gold, copper oxide, zinc oxide, silver, iron oxide, titanium oxide. These are the most commonly used metallic substances for designing nanoparticles. Whereas for non-metallic, or you can say organic, we use carbon-based nanomaterials, silica, polymeric nanomaterials, and lipids. So I'll talk about few of them. See, gold and silver nanoparticles. This figure shows the yellow colored gold nanoparticles which have the ability to cross the biological membrane. Once it enter into the cell, as an intact gold nanoparticle, it can enter into mitochondria and nucleus and cause damage. either it can generate the free radicals, that is reactive oxygen species, and again these can damage nucleus, produce inflammatory cytokines, cause protein denaturation and lipid peroxidation. So these are the kinds of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 damages which can be caused by gold nanoparticles. Likewise, we have silver nanoparticles. Now, silver nanoparticles are very frequently used in designing formulations, and this can enter into the biological membrane and it can be retained here itself. So it can damage the biological membrane. Thereafter, it enters into the cell. Again, the intact particle can damage mitochondria and nucleus. We have silver ion also, which is not seen in case of gold. Silver ion can again damage nucleus and mitochondria. Then we have the ROS system, that is reactive species, which can be generated both from silver and from the silver nanoparticle. And again, it causes the same kind of reactions which the gold nanoparticle does. Similarly, we have copper oxide nanomaterials. These are widely used in antimicrobial agents and intrauterine devices, contraceptive intrauterine devices, and they have toxic effects on liver, kidney, and spleen. When given orally, they can interact with the gastric juice, cause highly reactive ionic copper, and this ionic copper gets accumulated in kidney. So it has nephrotoxicity. Apart from this, genotoxic and cytotoxic reports have been made by the researchers. Likewise, we have carbon-based nanomaterials in which the two types of nanomaterials are used, carbon nanotubes and fullerenes. And most commonly used is the carbon nanotubes. It is used as single or multi-walled, and these materials are cytotoxic, and the toxicity is dependent upon the size. And the multi-walled carbon nanotubes have carcinogenic effects. Now, what happens is these carbon nanotubes, if they get accumulated in the body, especially the single-walled carbon nanotubes, they can accumulate in the liver and cause disturbance in the biochemical parameters. Like they can change the value of LDH, aspartate transaminase, alanine transaminase, and glutathione, etc. So various biochemical parameters can be affected because of accumulation of CNTs in the kidney, in the liver, sorry. Whereas fullerenes, they are in general considered not toxic, but some genotoxicity has been reported by this. Now, CNT is present, primarily present inhalation hazards. Why? Because and they have more toxicity than larger size particles. The most important thing is they are fiber shaped. So they might behave like asbestos or other pathogenic fibers because they are needle shaped fibers. So the toxicity will be same as the asbestos fiber. It is a possibility. And then the third property is they are essentially graphitic in nature. They are made of graphite. Graphite molecules are there. So there is a possibility they may tend to accumulate in the body. So accumulation is always a dangerous thing because it may further lead to carcinogenic activity. In contrast to these metal oxides, we have polymeric NPs also, which are organic materials, and the most commonly used organic material is PLGA, that is polylactic glycolic acid. And if you see, most of the papers sustained and controlled release formulations of nanocarriers, they primarily very frequently have used PLGA. And basically, it is a biodegradable polymer, and it is widely used for targeted cancer therapy. And most of these polymers, which are used for nanocarriers, they are non-toxic, biocompatible, non-immunogenic, non-inflammatory, and do not activate neutrophils. So by and large, all these organic nanoparticles, they have been reported in the literature very widely. And because of this, their toxicity profile has already been established. That is, they are non-toxic and non-accumulating. So they are considered as safe materials for designing nanoformulations. Similarly, lipid nanoparticles. Now the lipids which are used, they have been developed as an alternative to polymeric NPs and liposomes. And they can be used to deliver drug via dermal, mucosal, oral, parenteral, pulmonary, and ocular route. So there are various administration routes which are possible, and They can be used for delivery of small molecules, large molecules like peptide and protein, and for gene delivery and vaccine delivery. And as I told you earlier, in case of what applies to polymer, applies to lipids also. Lipids are also widely explored. As the slide says, it has been explored for almost all routes and for all types of molecules. So it means that it is generally, most of the lipids are generally safe, and hence nano formulation is also considered as safe, and the toxicity data is rarely seen in case of nano formulations made with lipids. Now, whenever we want to administer the formulation, the oral route is the most preferred route. So we'll talk about what the nano carrier does to the GIT and what the GIT carrier. See, these are the five impacts of nano carriers on the GIT function. Number one, it tends to absorb the surface active components present in the GIT. See, the bile molecules, they have surface active components. So those components can be absorbed onto the nano carrier. So when the component gets absorbed, it is not available for normal function of the body. Likewise, there will be absorption of digestive or metabolic enzymes also, hampering the functions of the enzymes. Then many globular proteins are denatured after absorption to the particle surface because there is change in the thermodynamic environment of the proteins present in the body. Likewise, there can be reduction in the catalytic activity of the enzymes present in the body, and there can be reduction in the rate or extent of starch, lipid, or protein digestion within GIT. So whatever components are present in the GIT, they can get absorbed onto the nanocarrier because of the large surface area, and hence there will be reduction in their activities. So enzyme reduction, protein denaturation, surface active agents getting absorbed, all are these the problems. Actually, these are the small impact of the nanocarrier on the biological system, but which can lead to toxicity. So as the nanocarrier can affect the GI fluids, likewise the GI fluids can also affect the nanocarriers. They can affect by changing because of the pH and the ionic strength. When this changes, there can be change in the surface potential and electrostatic potential of the nanocarrier. So this will affect the aggregation of the nanocarriers in the body and interaction of this with other components. So if GI pH changes or its ionic strength changes, it influences the functional property of the nanoparticles. Likewise, the surface active components which are present in the GIT, they get absorbed, as I told you earlier, and they can alter their interfacial. So nano carrier ki interfacial properties be alter ho jayenge. And because of that, biological it is also altered. Then we have the enzymes which are present in the GIT. They can change the properties of certain types of nanoparticles depending upon the carrier system. And then the mucus layer. Now, this is very important because the ingested nanoparticles may adhere to or travel through or get absorbed by the mucus layer. And this is especially important because if the nanoparticle has to reach to the absorptive surface, then it should traverse or transfer itself across the mucus. Mucus is a protective lining across the GIT. So nanoparticle has to cross that mucus layer and reach the absorptive surface. So when it does so, it is disturbing the mucus layer and it can interact with the absorptive cell layer. So what happens is we can say that both the nanocarriers and the GI fluid, these are the two components, they have opposite effect on each other. They can interfere or influence each other's properties. And when both of them are interacting, the GI components are interacting with the nanocarrier, what will be the impact? It will affect the release of the drug from the nanocarrier. So which means that the toxicity of nanocarriers is an important consideration. And when we are thinking about toxicity, there are various things which should be taken into account. First is what is the diameter? The diameter of the nanocarrier. What is the shape of the nanocarrier? Whether it is elongated, spherical, or wrap shape, whatever it is. Then what is the specific surface area of the nanocarrier? The chemical composition, whether it is made up of inorganic, organic material, lipid, polymer, and so on. And apart from this, what is the surface chemistry, which is affected by the coating on the nanocarrier, the charge on the nanocarrier, and the solubilization capacity. So all these affect the surface chemistry. Now, all these factors, the diameter, shape, size, specific surface area, chemical composition, and surface chemistry, they will impact the interactions of the nanocarrier among themselves as well as with the body. So that can cause aggregation or agglomeration, interaction with proteins, or interaction with receptors. All these parameters will get affected. And this insert is basically depicting the effect of shape of the nanocarriers. MSN means mesoporous silica nanoparticles. So MSNs have spherical surface, or you can have square shaped, or you can have rectangular MSNs. So when these are administered orally to an animal, this is the test animal, rat is being depicted, it can affect both the biodistribution, the elimination, and the toxicity. So this slide is basically telling about the effect of various aspects of nanocarriers which can cause impact on the physiological activity of the nanocarrier as well as on the toxicity. So because toxicity is so important consideration, it means, and we have so many carriers with us. So we need a classification system. And Muller has designed a nanotoxicological classification system very much similar to the biopharmaceutical classification system, where nanocarrier been divided into 4 classes of class 1, class 2, class 3, and class 4. So class 1 and class 2 nanocarriers are those in which there is no endocytosis of the particle. So this is the first category of classification where the particle is not being endocytosized by the cell. And in class 1, the category is size above 100 nanometer and it is biodegradable. Class 2 is size above 100 nanometer but is non-biodegradable. Class 3 and class 4 are those particles which undergo endocytosis. The nanocarriers undergo nanocytosis. And again, the class 3 is size below 100 nanometer and biodegradable. Class 4 is size below 100 nanometer and non-biodegradable. So these are the classification systems of nanocarriers. And if you see, there's a traffic signal which states that green means there is no issue of toxicity, yellow means low toxicity, and red means very high toxicity. So it means that class 4 nanocarriers are highly toxic. And this graph has been made between size and persistency, that is biodegradability. Apart from the size, the material also plays a very important role. The material which we have used to design the nanocarrier system. So the ones which are listed in green, they are safe without toxicity. The ones which are with yellow, that is silica nanoparticles, they are of low toxicity, whereas gold nanoparticles have high oral toxicity. This is talking about oral toxicity. And if you see, most of the nanocarriers made with natural polymers like chitosan, alginates, proteins, and polyester based or they are lipid based, they are relatively safe. So they are considered as safe in terms of no oral toxicity, whereas polymethyl methacrylate based also are with no toxicity. So this scale is between biodegradability and the size. And if you're talking of these low toxicity and high toxicity, we should remember the size also. So when the size range is between 100 to 1000, only then these are considered as safe. Likewise, silica also low toxicity when it is somewhere less than 100 and slightly above 100. Otherwise, the size is also important. It's not just the material. So how to assess the toxicity of the nanocarriers? There are 3 methods of assessing the toxicity. That is cell toxicity. We can measure cell toxicity, immunotoxicity, or genotoxicity. So the testing is done either by in vitro method or by in vivo method. In vitro methods are used for nanoparticle testing, and they evaluate cell proliferation, apoptosis and necrosis, DNA synthesis and damage, altered gene expression, immunogenicity, and oxidative stress. So these parameters can be evaluated by in vitro testing. But in vitro testing is not sufficient because this testing is carried out under standardized conditions, and the conditions are very simple, controlled and simple conditions. So we always need in vivo studies so that we can carry out in a actually in the real biological system, the studies may be carried out. And these are the various functions which are evaluated by in vivo nanocarrier toxicity testing. And we can use histopathology by electron microscoping, H&E dyeing, special dyeing, and immunohistochemistry techniques can be taken help of to carry out these studies. And also study the biodistribution of the nanocarriers in brain, kidney, spleen, testes and ovaries, lung, trachea, liver, and blood. Why the study is important? Because it will tell us about the tendency of accumulation of nanocarriers in a particular organ. And that will tell whether the nanocarrier has potential to cause cancer or not. So this slide gives a list of experimental models which can be used, including the bacteria, some aquatic animals, and some small pigs, guinea pig, pig, mouse, etc. Even we can carry out the studies in the cells, cell lines we can carry out, and then some organs can also be used for carrying out the studies. So basically the model will be selected based on the type of result we are looking for. And these are the list of toxic effects which can be evaluated. So there's a huge list. I've already discussed some of them earlier, so I'm missing this. Now, what are the testing issues? When we carry out these, so see, as I told, this previous slide told us that there's a huge list of test methods available for testing. So it means that we have different test methods to establish toxicity, which means that each researcher may select any of the method, which means there will be lab to lab variation in the test methods, and hence it would be very difficult to directly compare the results. So what is needed is the blue, these two boxes, they are suggesting the solutions. These are the problems. So the method is we should have standardized methods to evaluate the toxicity which are reproducible. That is, whether the test is conducted in one lab or another lab or faraway lab, all the results, all of them should be reproducible in nature. And in addition, we should have an internationally agreed, free of bias in vivo toxicological model. See, we do not have any regulated preclinical models. If a researcher wants to do any preclinical testing, there is no regulated guidelines for carrying out these testing. So we can say that nanotoxicology is very important, and but the paradox is that European, US, and Japanese regulatory agencies have guidelines for pharmaceutical toxicology, but they do not have guidelines for pharmaceutical nanotoxicology. So a revision is required in their guidelines to have guidelines on pharmaceutical nanotoxicology. Then we need efficient standard methods to analyze for chemicals and pharmaceutical drugs, but they should be able to evaluate the genotoxicity also, because these tests are not sufficient to evaluate nanotoxicology. So we require improved versions of standard tests which can help in evaluation of nanotoxicology. And everybody of us knows that nanopharmaceutical drugs are highly attractive carriers for, especially for treating cancer and other pathologies, but eventually there's a need to evaluate the hidden side effects. So the conclusion is that nanocarriers may present bioburden problems because they tend to accumulate in the body tissues, and they may aggravate certain highly catalytic activity in the host. So what the US FDA has done, it has taken into the account the issue of toxic effects of the nanocarriers. all those products which contain nanocarriers, it has taken into account that they need to be assessed for the toxicity, and it does not consider them totally safe for human use, which means that each product will in future be subjected for regulation. Thank you very much for the patient hearing, and we can have a questions answer session based on this topic.
Sure, ma'am. It was a very enlightening. So we have a few questions from the participant. Ms. Shivani has asked, does the route of administration has any effect of nanocarrier toxicity? Means, does the route of nanocarrier?
I sorry, your voice is not clear, but I've read the question, right? See, I must
Okay.
say
Yes.
that this toxicological classification system was designed by Muller. And as I've constantly been telling in my slide that there are no regulatory guidelines till date available for, but it's a system which has been proposed by a scientist called Muller, and actually it is forming a basis. It is forming a basis for easy understanding of the toxicity. Okay, so it can be taken as a scientific tool, not as a regulatory guideline.
Okay. The Mr. Ashish Jain has asked, can you suggest which nanocarrier has the lowest toxicity?
Which has least toxicity.
Yes.
According to me, yeah, I showed it in the slide also. I think PLGA. My choice will be PLGA. Otherwise, any other polymer which is GRAS listed or even lipids can be safely used.
Okay. So Ms. Archana has asked, how actually shape of nanoparticle affect or impart the various level of toxicity? That I think you have already.
This also I showed in my slide that if we're talking, I gave an example of mesoporous silica nanoparticles. It has different shapes. See, it is not only the nanocarrier shape which is important, it is also the physicochemical property which is present around the particle. So basically, it will impact the biodistribution, it will impact the elimination, and it will impact its accumulation. And actually, the shape means I cannot say that spherical shape is safe. It is not like that. It will ultimately depend on many other things like the nanocarrier material which is being used, the surface chemistry of the nanocarrier. All these things, combined effect will be have. Just one by one, we can just generate some scientific literature that this property will have this kind of effect. But absolutely saying that this shape will be more effective, that is not possible. But one thing I would like to say, whenever we design nano formulations, most of the times, except for cubosomes or carbon nanotubes, we get spherical particles most of the times. So carbon nanotubes are needle shaped, they have different properties, they behave like asbestos, and the cubosomes, they are cube-like structures, and their accumulation, their toxicity and biodistribution will depend upon the interaction of the nanocarrier with the surface, absorbing surface. That is my answer for that.
Okay. And there's another question from Ms. Anish Pradhan. He's asking, how do we include nephrotoxicity study in our research work?
I couldn't get your question, please.
I think it is something not very much related to your talk. He's asking how we can include nanotoxicity study in our research. It is related.
Okay, so you can carry out in vitro testing. I listed all the experiments. And in vivo experiments you can do, but see, in vivo experiments, whenever you do, you have various ethical issues attached to it because you'll be using animals. But otherwise, you can refer to various papers. There are, though the number of papers on toxicity studies are less, but still you get data on in vitro testing. You can count, you can carry out cellular studies, in vitro cell line studies, in vitro testing, and in vivo testing, any of these three. But first you will of course proceed with in vitro, followed by in vivo. And if you are interested in getting the mechanism or assessing the cellular damage, then you can go for cell line studies also.
Thank you, ma'am. There's another related question from Jyoti Rani Devi, she's asking how can we choose a nano carrier for showing least toxicity? That means she's asking which nano carrier is the best out of. I think this question is already being asked.
Yeah.
I think
Actually,
like
polymer and organic materials होने चाहिए and polymer and lipids, they are the best till date.
biodegradable kind. Okay, ma'am. So there is so many more questions are there, which I think you have already discussed during your presentation. So there's a lot of appreciation. Mr. Karthikeyan has asked, there's a lot of complication in technology transfer of nano drugs, even after a lot of in vivo experiments. What is your idea on this? He's asking.
Yeah, I totally agree with him. There are lots of issues because when we do studies in lab, that is being done at very small scale, at very controlled conditions, and as soon as we go for scale up, there are numerous problems. First and foremost problem with nanotechnology is aggregation. The thermodynamic stability is the major issue, that even if we have designed a nano formulations, after storage, it may tend to aggregate and convert into a micron sized particle. So that is the biggest trouble, and that is the reason, as I told in my earlier slides, that we have very few commercial products. Probably this is the reason, the thermodynamic instability and the lack of toxicity data. I think I've answered it.
Yes, Mr. Karthikeyan, I think you have got your answer. Okay,
Pardon,
so ma'am,
there's lots of echo.
Yes,
There's lots of echo from your side.
Hello, now it's okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Now it's fine.
So basically, ma'am, I think you have most of the points of the participant, and it's really a different type of. We have all those technology related discussion till now. Now you have taken our you can say point of view to the technology trends of the nano carrier. These are always not means it's not always positive. We have to look towards the negative part of the things, and that is very enlightening for us. Ma'am. And once again, I would like to thank you and pay my gratitude to you from Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences and Technology, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, Punjab Technical University. Ma'am, and as a gratitude, a token of gratitude, we are presenting you with a certificate of appreciation. Ma'am,
Yeah,
this is your certificate and we will provide you. And thanks a lot once again, ma'am, for your time, sparing your time.
The pleasure was mine to have that you gave me a chance to be a part of this prestigious webinar. I'm highly thankful to you for this particular opportunity. And I had a lovely participants who interacted also. So thank you each one for being a part of this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.